So it's absolutely fantastic to be able to welcome Alan White, legendary Yes drummer, onto the Yes Music podcast this week. And Mark is also with me. But hello, Alan.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And I hope you are as well.
Yes, I'm doing very, very well. I'm sitting here in the mountains in Washington State. I might as well make you guys feel good because it's raining here like cats and dogs.
Okay, so we're going to kick off with some questions then. Now, last year was a wonderful surprise for all Yes fans with the sudden appearance of this album or mini album From a Page, with Oliver Wakeman finishing it off. What do you think of what he's managed to do with that material?
Well, this was always material that was kind of left over from that period in the band's kind of life, and it's been hanging around. I always thought it had potential, some of it, and I think Oliver did a really great job of reviving it and cleaning it up and making it sound very good. So full marks to him.
Yeah, it's lovely to have that with us now. Is there anything else from the archives you'd like to see released in the same way?
Well, there are a lot of things in the archives, like jams that we've had and different times in the lifespan of the band. There's been quite numerous of those. I myself have quite a few kind of, files in my computer of these jams on music that go on forever and stuff. So some of that you kind of go through and revise some of it into potential future songs.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so Alan, I have a few questions for you. One question I have for you that I'm sure lots of Yes fans are curious about is, what is your favorite Yes album?
Oh my God, that's such a huge question. I'll go ask this a lot, and I think everybody in the band gets asked this question. I view every album in the band's career like a different period of time that we went through where we recorded an album and went on the road and played it. So I kind of like all of them. Obviously there's albums that stick out that have some really great music on that's, lifelong music to me, but, it has to be one's personal choice. But Relay, which we're doing on the next tour this year, is one of the, icon albums that sticks out. Relay has got a lot of intense, complex playing on it and music. So Relay would be one of them. Of course, Topographic to this day is an album that keeps reselling all the time, and has some very classic pieces of Yes music on it. But you have more obscure albums like Talk from the 90125 period of the band. We made an album called Talk. It's got some outstanding music on it, and it never really gets played that much. And of course, the album Drama that we made with Jeff and Trevor Horn, who from the period when they were in the Buggles and we met by chance in the studio, in the rehearsal rooms, and that's where the album came from. So these are all really great albums that they've made that came out of just by chance meetings and a combination of great musicians coming up with great music.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that, but I'm going to ask you something a little bit more specific, Alan. Which album do you feel, though, has your best recorded performance?
I think Relaya was a big landmark, as it were, in the drumming life of Yes, because there's some very intricate classical kind of time changes and adventurous rhythm section and adventurous drum patterns on that. For instance, the song Sound Chaser and Gates of Delirium. I mean, these are very, very interesting drum patterns that took a while long while to come up with, and just felt good at that time.
Well, it's great that we're talking about Relaya, and that was your second album, I think, that you recorded with the band, and it was recorded in Chris Squire's studio, wasn't it, at his home? Was that very different to the sessions for Topographic?
Yes, down in Virginia Waters, we used to go down there every day and work on rehearsing it, and then eventually recording it. Eddie Offord was the producer, and we got into some pretty wild stuff on that album, musically and also, sonically. I remember that John Anderson and myself used to stop by a scrapyard, a car scrapyard every morning, and we walk around the scrapyard banging on pieces of cars and, like car springs and different things to get some really different sounding percussion things going on. And then we eventually built a big rack in the studio with car parts hanging on it. And that's what we used for the percussion on the album, including, Delirium.
Yeah.
Where the sequence at the end of Digital Delirium is a battle between the keyboards and drums.
Yes.
And I pushed the whole thing over in the studio, and that is the chaotic kind of end to the crazy section. When I pushed it over, it just sounded like a huge car crash. So anyhow, interesting stuff like that we did, but it was very progressive at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you're talking about this sort of recording of Relayer, because one of the questions I had is that Sound Chaser specifically has a really fantastic tom-tom sound on that record. I really always loved that sound of your drums on that. Do you recall what drum set you might have used on that recording? And was there any kind of specific special miking used to achieve that sound?
Yes, I do. It was actually the same drum kit that I played on Imagine with John Lennon with.
Oh.
It was a 66 Ludwig Silver Sparkle.
Yeah. Wow.
It had amazing tom-tom sounds. And around that period of time, I recorded quite a few things on that kit. I still have it.
Okay, well, just taking the conversation on a bit further then, you must have lost count of the number of times you've had to follow up an album with another. So Tales to Relayer can't have been exactly easy. But can you tell us anything about the prospect of a new album in 2020?
Well, there's a possibility of that. I mean, we're all individually working on material at our home studios and coming up with different pieces that would form a Yes song and kind of that nature. So it's just getting the time to do it. We're kind of recording, hopefully, maybe this summer somewhere, probably in England somewhere.
Wow.
In and around the touring we have going on for the rest of the year. I mean, in a month, I'm doing a cruise. Yes, cruise to the edge, we call it. And then we stop and we do the European tour, which will be covering England and Europe. And then we have a little while off, and then we do an American leg.
Yeah.
We are going to try and fit some recording into this year.
I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Birmingham when you come over for that.
Okay, so Alan, since you were talking about writing material, I was wondering, do you still play piano at home, and have you written any new songs on the piano lately?
Yes, I have. Well, I used to have a grand piano at home, but I bought a cottage out in the mountains in the Washington State, and I have more of an electronic studio there now. And but I do still play at home and write different chord sequences and come up with ideas for different songs. Yes.
Okay, so from the piano back to drums again. One of my favourite setups of the drums that I've seen you using was on the 35th anniversary tour, which I think that guy with a wonderful name, Wreak Havoc, created for you.
Actually saw him a couple of days ago at the NAMM show in LA.
Yeah, what a great guy. And then, of course, before my time, Roger and Martin Dean's weird and wonderful fiberglass creations all round you. But I was going to ask you about electronics, and I know you've included electronics many times, but have you ever been tempted to have just an electronic kit?
Not really. I think it's great to have an acoustic drum kit for your basic instrument, and I just use electronics to embellish that and add different sounds and flavors to the acoustic kit. I've never really fully used a total electronic kit. To me, it gets a little bit, the feel of what you're playing disappears a little bit with me if I play electronics. I mean, some guys can probably pull it off, but I think you get much more of a feel for the music and a feel playing it when you're playing acoustic kit. And funnily enough, I was going through all of my kits yesterday that I have here in Washington, and I didn't realize I had so many drum kits. And I'm going, oh my God, pretty incredible. And then I forgot I've got another 8 or 9 kits in LA, so I've got to get the inventory going here.
Well, it's interesting that you talked about that now, because one of my questions I have for you as well is that you've been a long-time player endorser of Ludwig drums. What specifically attracted you to that drum company, and have you really ever considered changing, or are you going to be a lifelong Ludwig man?
Well, it's like, if I get into something that I really like, it's like, why change it if it works, And I found that out at an early age with Ludwig when I played on Imagine with John Lennon. That was Ludwig, and from that day I always endorsed Ludwig, and they've always been really great to me. And in fact, they used to call me every year and say, it's about time you had another kid. And I'd say, I don't want any more. I've got what I want. And I'm very happy with what I've got right now, and it's doing the job for me. And the kit I use on stage right now, I've used for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Great. So my last question for you that I have is that Jay Shellen has been touring with you guys for quite a while now. What are your impressions of his drumming, and what song do you think that he does very well?
Jay's a great drummer, and we've been working together on playing Yes music and in the framework of Yes. I don't know, he actually, anything that I played, I think Jay kind of modeled himself on my playing at an early age in life, and so a lot of things it's very hard to kind of sit there and watch him play because he plays it exactly like I do. And, it's just like a cardboard cutout kind of thing. But the song he plays very well. We played gigs of Delirium on the last tour, and he does that song exceptionally well, considering it's pretty complex.
What about Sound Chaser then? Because some very unkind people have wondered if he can, move into that kind of version of your playing.
Well, that's the animal amongst us. Sound Chaser is a very, very difficult song to play, but we've never really attempted to play that song for a long time. So we're about to get into rehearsals of it in about a month's time. And I'm looking forward to it, really. But I wrote the song on the drums. I came up with the part, and I made my bed. Now I've got to lie in it. I've got to reproduce it again. But you must remember that song is incredibly exhausting to play on stage. I mean, it's very, very fast. We'll attempt what we can, but, obviously, I told Jay, he's been learning it as well, so I've got it inbuilt in my system because I've played it so many times in my life. it's extremely hard to play on stage.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we can pull it off.
Brilliant. I just wanted to ask you about Whitefish. Now, that was something which kind of evolved over time with Chris Squire. Can you tell us a bit about how that came about, and do you miss that kind of live event?
Yeah, it was pretty incredible because Chris had this kind of bass lick that he had, and I got into playing with him and messing around with different rhythms and just embellishing what Chris came up with. And we got into a pattern that we developed with the two of us because over the years we spent a lot of time playing music together. I played with Chris for 43 years before he passed. And that's a long time with the same person, so you develop a relationship where I just knew what he was going to play before he played it, and vice versa. So that's where things like Whitefish and Silent Wings of Freedom came from.
Yeah. Well, it's fantastic you mentioned Silent Wings, because Tomato, as everybody listening to the podcast already knows, is my favourite Yes album. But last thing from me, what about an autobiography? We would love to read your story. What about writing one of those?
For quite a few years now, people have been asking me to put all my memoirs down and write a book, but I keep telling them I'm not finished yet.
Good point.
to which they say, well, we can do a sequel. And I'm saying, well, I eventually will. And I think it could be quite an interesting adventure into living in the 70s playing music with people like John Lennon and you know, all the experiences I went through, like Live Peace in Toronto, to Joe Cocker, to Ginger Baker, and, you know, all the bands I played with. Mind you, the one thing I always say about that kind of thing is if you tell the real truth in a book, you lose a lot of friends.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Which I think goes for everybody, but at the same time, you know, it's very worthwhile putting it all down in a book that's readable, and it's a pleasure to read about that period in my life.
Yeah. So, Alan, I have one last question to ask you. And since you already answered about the autobiography, one thing that I think is sorely missing in the world is an Alan White drum instructional video. Have you ever been asked to do one of those?
Of course I do. I have, and I've mentioned the thoughts of doing it many times, but I find, you know, it has to be something different. Because I find a lot of the instructional videos go through the same rudiments and do all of the kind of things, and it's repeated over and over again from a lot of different instructional books. So I try to do an instructional video and drumming kind of teaching kind of book about how to play music with a band and how to get feel out of it and what to listen for and all of these aspects. So I'd rather come from that direction.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for your time, Alan. It's fantastic to speak to you, an inspiration to us all, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you when you come over to the UK.
Yeah, come and say hi when we play.
I certainly will. That'll be absolutely brilliant. So thank you once again, Alan, and all the best for the upcoming tours in 2020.
All right. Thanks very much.
Good luck, Alan.